I now call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Director Poshan, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
Mission statement: the Davenport Community School District is dedicated to growing excellence in academics, the arts, and athletics for every child by ensuring the highest quality education in an environment shaped by a diverse community, preparing our students to be lifelong learners and productive citizens. Vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you, Director Poshan. Director Beck, would you please read the guiding principles?
Opportunity. We provide abundant opportunities to empower students to reach their full potential academically, creatively, and socially. Collaboration. We foster an environment that allows students, families, and community stakeholders to come together for the betterment of our students' education and future. Transparency. We share relevant and important information with our students, families, and the community to maintain open and productive communication.
Thank you. Superintendent Schneckloff, would you please read the goals?
Goal number 4 is the focus tonight to foster the innovative use of finances, facility, and staff.
Thank you. Up next, we got recognition. Are there no recognitions tonight? We'll move on to presentations. First, only item up is modified allowable growth, dropout prevention, budget, and data. Turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. We have our modified allowable growth team coming up, which is led by Courtney Olson. I do want to share that there's going to be a slight difference in the format of this. This is the time when we usually bring forth the modified allowable growth budget, potentially with some data to share with you. And when we bring that forward, we're usually bringing a very descriptive program for how we intend to use those dollars. One of the goals in the Davenport schools in the last 3 to 5 years has been to do an overhaul of these programs, to do a deep dive, to do an analysis of how are we utilizing our dollars, what are the best, what's the best way to maximize our resources. I'm very proud to say that the team sitting in front of you are incredibly hardworking human beings, and they've decided to take that task on. And so you're going to see a more general presentation, as the board has to approve this in January, the first regular meeting in January. So here's an opportunity to see the direction that we're heading with some data points. But what we have an opportunity to turn the corner, to turn the page, to do something different, to imagine what's working currently in our district, optimize that, and then where can we reallocate some of our resources to maximize them. And while that is a very difficult job, this group of people is attacking that work, and I'm incredibly proud of that. So you will not see the specifics tonight of how we plan to do that, but our intentions is to continue to bring that forth to the board as we begin to develop programs and begin to develop how we plan to allocate those resources. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Courtney to introduce the team that she has with them and then get started on our presentation. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it and embarking on what I would consider a very difficult journey.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to have my team introduce themselves before we get started.
I'm Jen Van Fleet. I'm your state federal program specialist.
Hi, I'm Heather Harland. I am the state and federal programs budget specialist.
And I think it's also important to point out that this is these are 3 members of our team. We have a very robust team, a lot of voices in on this work.
Thank you. All right. So we are very excited to be here tonight to share with you our vision for at-risk programming within Davenport Community School District. Yes. Thank you. I'm like, it's not rolling. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, we wanted to establish our why for this work. And this is we are growing excellence here in Davenport School. So to do that, we need to design a pre-K-12 continuum of services within our system to meet the academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our at-risk students in an effort to ensure high school graduation, and even more importantly, a productive and hopeful vision for their future after Davenport schools. So that's what we're grounding ourselves in. So in order to do something different, to try to achieve different results, we are going about this differently, as Superintendent Schneckloff described. So our current reality is we have a deadline with the DE in the middle of January that we have to submit that we've received our board's approval to ask for the full 5% of modified allowable growth dollars, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So to meet that compliance deadline of getting your approval to ask for the full amount, we need to get in front of you today and in January to meet that deadline. However, that's the compliance piece, and to do something different is we want to take more time to build a system for our students with intentionality. So our plan is, and we've already started the work, is to bring a team together to get input across our system to truly design a continuum that meets the needs of our students. And so that's our goal. We want to completely rethink what we've done because we know our data to date doesn't show that we're making a difference yet. So the options were to come with a budget already allocated that we've had in past previously that we know that's not moving the mark, or to take the time to do it right and be transparent in that process. So that's our goal, and what we're going to walk you through today is how we see bringing that to light. So overview for tonight, we're just going to give an overview of modified allowable growth and at risk. We're also going to talk about the continuous improvement process and how we're engaging our team and various stakeholders across the district in this process to design our at-risk system, and then our roadmap for the future. And just so you can see as we cascade this information throughout our district, in October, our MAG team started meeting. We've met with secondary principals, elementary principals, preschool principal to get input. We've taken this to cabinet, DSAT. We're here with you tonight, and that is the cascade model that we'll continue to utilize as we build this system. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jen to give the overview.
So we think it's important as we move forward with wanting to do this correctly that we have all the shared understanding and common definitions of when we're talking about at-risk and dropout prevention. So what you see on this slide is actually from the Iowa Code as they define at-risk and dropout prevention work. And so their definition is boards of school districts requesting to use a modified supplemental amount for programs for at-risk students, secondary students who attend alternative programs and alternative schools, and returning dropouts and dropout prevention shall approve by resolution comprehensive program plans for the programs and budget costs, including that annual request for a modified supplemental amount for funding the programs, which is what we're doing this evening. And then we next look at the state's interpretation of that Iowa Code, the Department of Education's interpretation. And so they really look at this as a local decision. So they put the onus on the local school district to decide what that those indicators are and what they're going to look at for their at-risk programming. Down. And keep going. And keep going. There you go. And so since it is a local decision on what exactly that looks like and how that's defined, our MAG team really took a lot of time and care to think about what are the components of an at-risk program that can meet the continuum of needs for students. And so there are 4 major pieces of our framework for DCSD at-risk, and those would be academics, attendance, emotional safety, and graduation rates. So the purpose of our team is to go through a continuous improvement process. And we really did look, and we're going to share some information tonight about previous modified allowable growth and dropout prevention and whether or not we had impact or what parts were having impact or not having impact. And that really helped us to look currently at our current state. And so we are currently engaging in a data review. We've done a lot of that. We will continue to do that as we move forward with continuous improvement. So then when you're looking at those components of the at-risk programming, there are 4 major sections, as we mentioned. We're going to highlight data from 2 of those tonight because we know that previously this school year you've had presentation on academics, FAST data, ISASP data, and you've also had emotional safety data presented to you with conditions for learning. So we're not going to rehash that tonight, but those are components that our team looks at. We are going to share with you some information with attendance and graduation rates, which would be the other 2 components. And so when we look at those 2 data points, attendance and graduation rates, they are measured through, attendance is measured through 2 pieces, average daily attendance, and that's okay, and chronic absenteeism. And then graduation rates, we look at, or graduation success, we look at graduation rates and also dropout rate. And so what you see on this tab is a very simplified overview of multiple years of data and a trend line showing that if you look at any of those 4 components, our Davenport data is either staying stagnant or trending in an undesired direction. So that's leading our team to look and want to do something differently. So the big ahas, and this is very general, but this is what's driving our team. Number 1, what we've tried before as a system did not make the impact that we had hoped, and that we all agree that we have a responsibility to build a better at-risk system for our students.
So continue to move through our continuous improvement process. So we've assessed our impact. We've determined our current reality by looking at the data. And so next we have to identify strengths and barriers. And so we did that through principal input. And this is where we met with secondary principals and pre-K elementary principals. And so we really asked them, from your lens as a building leader, what's going well with our at-risk programming for students? What's not going well? What should we be doing? We really left it at that level from their lens because we really wanted their true input on what's working, what they're seeing working for students and what's not. And so this is just a synthesis of some of the things that they highlighted that they found were strengths, that when we can find protected time to address it in the master schedule, the redirection program, at-risk teachers, when we have full-time and numerous at-risk staff, counselors, school-based therapists, SSO, social workers, and that we have empathetic and committed staff that want to serve our students. Some barriers that were identified is just lack of understanding of organizational funding resources for at-risk, having to share at-risk staff across buildings, low pay for at-risk staff, and lack of systems and consistency for at-risk roles and processes. So when asking them what we should be doing, alternative scheduling and programming, additional at-risk support staff, innovative learning environments, and protected times in the master building schedule. Again, just a summary of some of the things that they've identified. So now that we've collected that information through our building leaders around strengths and barriers, now it's time to create a plan. We've got to tie actions to remove the barriers that they've identified, as well as acknowledge some of the solutions that they've already come up with. How do we move that forward? So we are creating a plan through our task team. And so within this task team, we're taking all that information and we're finding the big themes. What are the big rocks that we should be moving forward? We're making connections to priority work that's already in place, as well as what is best practice. We're initiating task teams. So even though this MAG oversight team, if you will, is made up of ourselves, some ILDs, and some other key critical friends, we know it's not our job just to move the work forward, that we know there'll be task teams that need to develop to get more stakeholder input voice in and to continue to move the work forward. Cascading, we want to make sure that we're communicating and collecting feedback. And when we develop an at-risk continuum of services, we want to keep in mind our 5 conceptual areas around MTSS that our state defines. And then ultimately developing a timeline for implementation. We know that will be realistic. What can we implement next year? But what do we want to implement by the following year and the following year, knowing that we have work we need to do on our system. So with that said, this is just that visual again to kind of show you where we've been, how we want to be compliant, but we also want to be innovative, and we want to make sure that we're building systems that meet our kids' needs. And so that's what brings us here today. I'm going to turn it back to Jen.
So if you remember from the Iowa Code slide, the last piece is that we come to you with an annual request for a modified supplemental amount for funding those programs. Next slide should have
Can't see it. Okay, thank you. You never give the mic to the money lady. Ooh, okay, so then we are requesting for your review and your approval to request 5.25 million. Actually, it's 5,250,072 in modified allowable supplement to serve our at-risk and dropout prevention program.
So in summary, we hope today that we've given you enough information. Of course, we'll open it up for questions to show you where we're heading with designing this system, knowing that we have to meet the compliance piece of your approval to request the funding. And as I feel like we've communicated, but I'll continue to say that we will continue to come back and share with you as we build and design for your guys' input on that as well. So are there any questions?
Director Beck.
Thank you for the presentation. One thing, I noticed one of the principal feedback slides, the one on barriers, said that the pay for staff was a barrier. But I didn't see that listed in the ideas for things we could be or should be doing. Is that part of the plan? Because we do know that adequate pay does promote.
That's part of negotiations and stuff on salaries and things like that.
Oh, okay, never mind.
And just keep in mind that was just a summary. We're still engaging in the CIP process to identify what are the actions to remove those barriers. So that's a part of our process still that we're working through.
Was that all you had, Director Beck? Director Gordon.
You talked about how things in the past have not worked since we're seeing the numbers go, in the wrong direction. But could you talk a little bit about the specifics of what's not working so that we have that on record and we know that we're not going to be heading in that direction again? We know what to be looking for in the future when these requests come up.
So there are, when we look at how we're spending our MAG dollars now, we could get you guys the information of what's currently being spent. But something that what we have to do is our job is identify, okay, of those things that we're doing, do we know their best practice? If they are best practice, are we implementing as we should be implementing them? And who are we trying to target, and is that how we want to use our funding sources? So those are questions we're going to have to work through as a team. But if you want specifics around what's being spent from those dollars, we can get that to you.
I guess I'm not quite as interested in the dollars. I know that's what we need to vote on, but more what is happening with the dollars that's not working? What programs have not worked? What staffing situations are not meeting the needs, like the details behind the money that's being spent. And I understand if you can't answer that right now, but I would like that information.
And we can definitely bring more specifics. Part of the response from the principals, and we've seen this ourselves too, is not any one role or program. It's the networking and the weaving of them together. And so they might be good on their own. But then if you line everything up, you might have a gap here and an overlap over here of resources. So that's something that we want to look at systemically across the board.
Director Gordon, did you have anything else? I got Director Posh and Director Potts.
Slide 13 on data trends. Talk about the average daily attendance and chronic absenteeism. So that percentage, that's the percentage of all students. So we're looking at 60% of all our students are chronically absent.
We'll have to collect that question, and we just want to make sure we're answering it right, Director Poston, how they're calculating that.
It's coming from a data visual on Tableau. I just am not familiar with the formula they're using, and so I can get you the specifics on that.
Did you have anything else, Director Poston? Director Potts?
I think when most people think of dropout prevention, they think of preventing people from dropping out when they can drop out. And you mentioned preschool, so I'm curious to what might preschool dropout prevention look like? I'm not questioning I'm just saying preschool.
No, yep, fair question. So
Somebody's got to bring them. I mean,
it's really coming at this a different way, right? Like all of our job as public educators are to get students to graduation and through graduation for post-secondary success. So even though we're here tonight around MAGDOP dollars, our vision is really building that system pre-K-12. What do we need for all of our kids? And then how do we use the funding sources we have to appropriately achieve that? So absolutely having kids in preschool and getting education and, learning all those things help with high school graduation.
I would echo your question, and it even came back to how the state defines dropout prevention, and they look at those early indicators from pre-K3 and how that is a trajectory for our students. So that's how that came into our lap. Fair question.
Director Klein-Jerome?
So we are going to vote on a dollar amount. Before you go to SBRC, do you not have to have a plan in place to say, this is why we need the increase and this is our plan? Because I don't imagine they're just going to say, oh, we need the money, and they're going to say, sure, go for it.
The application with the SBRC is very general, and it's all held locally when it comes to the plan process. So you're exactly right to ask that question, because in the past, we've had to give a very, explicit explanation of how the dollars are to be used. But in this application, SBRC just says you are eligible for the full weighted dollar amount, and then you, with your board, have to have the full approval for the use of the funds. So that's part of the allowing us to even request it, would be you guys knowing that we're all on board for what the program's going to look like behind the scenes. So it's just not housed at the SBRC anymore.
And when would it go to SBRC? March?
Actually, we request with the SBRC in January, so that's why we're asking for your approval January 9th, because we have to have everything submitted by the 15th of January to say we're requesting these funds. It's all on an automated system. I mean, it's online. It's not a presentation to the SBRC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Director Beck?
Yeah, two other quick questions. So one, a lot of the data we're seeing, or all the data we're seeing, spans the pandemic closures. And I know that no matter what, all things being equal, increased a lot of these factors, chronic absenteeism, for example, and dropout rates. Are we building that into our plan for how to improve some of these indicators, that some of it is pandemic related and maybe something that won't necessarily be an issue in 5 years, or, okay. I don't know if there's any research going on or anything like that about that.
Well, I think we're all still thinking about responding to the lost learning and everything. Even we're talking about ESSER funding. So that's certainly something that comes into play. And you can see on that slide that had the trend line, that blip, and that blip's the pandemic, right? But even if you were to draw a straight line, you're still seeing some data that we want to address. So we think even in the absence of the pandemic, we would still have work to do, but the pandemic just makes it even more important for us.
And then my only other question was, given that Director Potts asked about preschool, and you indicated that's one of the early indicators, how does this fit in with the current emphasis on early literacy and kind of weaving all of that together?
Yeah.
that would be an example of where, as we're designing the continuum that we need for our students, we're making connections to already priority important work that's happening, as well as what are we missing. So definitely making those connections.
I think it's also important to note we're here today asking about a specific funding source, the MAGDOP funding source, but our work with the at-risk program and continuum is braiding in all available resources, so other funding resources and other priority areas.
Director Hayes.
I want to thank each of you for your time that you put into it. I noticed that you said it would be going into effect for the 22 or 23-24 school year. It sounds like there's a lot of loopholes in it and you're still wanting to perfect it before you roll out, and I appreciate you for that, because we're not wanting another program that doesn't work well, so thank you for that. Also, how many people total are on your team? Approximately.
There's 6 or 7 of us on the core team, and then as far as like cascading, we're going out to the DSAT that might have, I don't know, 20 people on it, and all the principals, and that's just the cascading that we've done so far. We also want to cascade with teachers and students and families as we go along. So, but our core team has 7 people on it.
Well, I look forward to great things coming from you.
Any other questions? Student board members, you got anything on this one? Okay. Thank you all for the presentation. I like the fact that if things aren't working, we switch it up and do something different, because nothing's worse than beating a dead horse. And thanks for looking, not only just for next year, but multiple years out, because we need things that are sustainable and effective and work. So thank you all very much for the presentation. Student board reports.
On the north side, so every year at North we have a mini festival of trees in our library, where students can submit their own Christmas tree to be voted on for a prize of what's typically a donut party or something of that nature. And so our Festival of the Trees was just this past week, and this morning we got the top 3 winners of all the trees, and the trees come from, again, students. So my AP Psychology class, we submitted a Psychola tree. There was, I believe there was a chemistry from the chemistry class, and several other trees like that. And the tree that raises the most money is the winner. The money goes to an angel tree project that the TAG kids at North are working on. And again, this year just had a lot of exciting submissions. And I've included a short Google slideshow that was sent to the board. I think it's a really nice, fun thing to look at. And I believe that TAG and the group running this Festival of the Trees has formally invited the board to include a tree of their own in next year's Festival of the Trees. So, National Honor Society at North has been raising money the last week, I should say the last several weeks, for Brittany's Gifts, with fundraisers like Holiday Explosion, where we decorate a teacher's room by surprise with lots of holiday decorations, and they have to raise money in order to get that moved to another room. So through Holiday Explosion, gift wrapping, and candygram sales, they've raised over $800 towards Brittany Gifts and counting. We have a very busy day Wednesday wrapping lots of presents. This weekend was High School Musical Junior, performed by the North Drama team. Despite numerous challenges that they came across, the drama department prevailed and put on an amazing show both days. I was able to go both days, and it was an amazing experience. And with that, auditions for the spring musical Newsies are on this Thursday, the 15th, and it's going to be a very exciting musical performed back on a new stage, which is under construction right now. So more details will be released as we get closer to the spring. And finally, student council members helped sort and count over 1,400 toys on Saturday, December 3rd. Me and 5 of my peers were at the Toys for Tots warehouse in Moline, and we spent a few hours down there, and it was a very good experience. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, and then over at West, first, just a couple of congratulations. So Kylie Daly was named the QC All Metro Cross Country First Team. She established a new record for 5,000 meters with a runner-up finish of 19 minutes 11 seconds at the Seminole Valley Golf Course in Cedar Rapids. She was 10th at MAC, 13th at PV State Qualifier, and 48th at the 4A State Meet. Then we have a couple of Student of the Month shout-outs for 9th grade. Datavius Lewis, nominated by Ms. Caja. Josiah Mendoza, nominated by Ms. Gastro. Kaylin Ruckold, nominated by Ms. Ingalls. And Bella Davis, nominated by Ms. Schaefer. So congratulations to you guys. Our ecology club is selling aluminum water bottles, reusable water bottles, for $15, which will be used for is a fundraiser for club projects. And then over the past week, we had a speech and debate in Invitational where we had Neo, I'm not going to try pronouncing that last name, for placing first in dramatic interpretation, Elliot Griffith placing second in dramatic interpretation, and Trinity Merrick placing third in congressional debate. And over the past, the past weekend, we had a small group of the speech and debate team actually go out to Des Moines to compete in a competition. That was Ariana Dolph, Wyatt Hill, Mariana Lee, Trinity Merrick, Neo, last name again I'm not going to try to pronounce, and Clementine Springsteen. And then last thing I want to add on was just like what's going on at North, we're also raising money for Brittany's Gifts, which has led to a very interesting scenario in which our president is also not only is the president of National Honor Society, but I believe a senior class president as well. So it led to us kind of stealing one of their fundraising ideas, or actually them stealing one of our fundraising ideas. So to any parents who have kids that go to West, if you're wondering why we're doing candy cane grams 2 weeks in a row, now you know why.
Thank you, Jackson and Landon. We appreciate hearing from our student board members. Board reports. Are there any board reports? Director Hayes?
The board would like to express our deepest condolence to Director Beck in the recent passing of her mother.
Any other board reports? I have a few. I attended the winter performance at Fillmore Elementary. It was a packed house, a lot of happy parents, grandparents, and everything in there. The kiddos did an awesome job. I was also at the North Drama High School Musical Junior. It was a great, they put on a great show. I highly want to commend, and I do not know the student's name that was playing Sharpay. I know when the lights went out, they had a little bit of a collision, and the next time she came out, she had a big knot on her head and continued the performance all the way through and did a great job. So I really want to commend them on that. And then also to all of the board members. We were able to go to the ISB convention, and with the majority of our board getting enough credits through the ISB, we got the Better Boardsmanship Award, along with, I think, 4 board members getting individual rewards or awards. I do want to let everyone know that Brenda is going to work with the ISB to make sure we send stuff out, so that we're making sure I'd like to have all 7 of us full 100% next year is a goal. And then I do want to thank everyone that was up there. We were able to actually put a presentation on during the convention, kind of about what Davenport's been through. I think it was called Forged in Fire. No other school district has been through that like we have, so it was very nice. Made a lot of connections, and then I attended the board president's workshop the next day, and then I was one of the facilitators during that workshop as well, because of all the work that we've done as a board and everything like that. So I do want to thank you all for going above and beyond and putting in all the extra effort. With no other board reports, I will move on to communications. Open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak, please fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The form is available in hard copy for in-person attendees or on the school board page of the district's website for those who want to participate virtually. Virtual participants must email their request to Brenda T. at tbren@davenportschools.org by 3 p.m. on the day of the board meeting. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. Iowa open meetings laws prohibit action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president may set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. You will be asked to state your name and home address prior to making remarks. Did we have any virtual participants, Brenda? No. None? All right. And we have 2 tonight for in-person. Up first, we will have Sarah Brennan and then Ann McGlynn, and 2 minutes. Make sure you push the button and the light comes on green.
Sarah Brennan, 1921 Tremont Avenue in Davenport. President Goza, members of the school board, and Superintendent Schneckloff, good evening. My name is Sarah Brennan, and I'm here today as a parent of Davenport students and as an advocate for our students and families that I have worked with in our buildings for the last 7 years. In just a brief time, tonight the board votes on closing 3 of our neighborhood schools that have some of the highest socioeconomic disadvantages and generational trauma. In doing so, these actions will be felt by many for years to come. These buildings are filled with some of our most intelligent, creative, and persistent students and staff, and what a devastating loss this will be for everyone involved. My heart aches for all of those who will feel the effects of this unfortunate and difficult decision being made here tonight. We are talking about students and families that will face further barriers, limiting their pursuit of happiness and success. Research shows closing schools can and will have a ruinous effect on those directly and indirectly impacted. From unconducive proximity to alternative school buildings, trauma of the transition, loss of relationships between peers and staff, increase in nonviolent crimes, and much more. There are far too many systems that will be impacted, and unfortunately, our school-based therapists, school social workers, counselors can only do so much with what little time and resources they have. Some of these students and families have lives with little to no continuity, housing and food insecurity, and lack protective factors, variables which are no fault of their own. We know from years of empirical research that there are imperative elements which decrease the likelihood of childhood mental illness and trauma, and subsequently will increase academic success. Moreover, closing neighborhood schools will further intensify both internal and external locus of control for our students and families, thus placing a further weight on our staff and our community at large. Closing Buchanan, Monroe, and Washington will extend far beyond these walls, and we will feel the impact not only in our buildings, but our community when that time comes. In fact, I would be remiss to say our educators, families, students, and communities have felt this for quite some time. As the fourth largest district school in Iowa, we have an obligation to serve our students, especially those who are most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. My name is Ann McGlynn. I live at 3009 Grand Avenue in Davenport. I have one graduate of Davenport Schools and a kiddo who's a junior at Central. I also lead an organization called Tapestry Farms, and we have 21 kids who attend 9 school districts in Davenport. I did take the time last week to speak, but I just wanted to come back and reiterate a couple of things. First of all, I know many of you, and I appreciate many of you, and I know that this decision is extraordinarily difficult. But as we move forward, no matter the decision that's made tonight, I'm going to advocate for 2 things. The first thing is, the next time, hopefully there won't be a next time, but the next time our school district has to close schools, please, please, please look at the schools first that have the highest percentage of kids who come from high SES families. Don't look at the low SES schools with many, many kids who are low SES. Please, look at the other schools first. And then second, as if the schools are closed, voted on being closed tonight, and I'll do what we always do, which is advocate for our 21 kids. So I have 3 kids who will be in a school, Buchanan, who would be affected. And here's what I ask. Please make sure that those kids that can now walk to school make it to school every day. And I'll tell you that we'll do our part. We'll be there early in the morning if we sense that they're not making the bus. But if you could just make sure that they get a really great bus driver who's trauma informed, who understands it might take an extra minute or 2, that would be great. If we could get a cafeteria worker in the morning to greet them with a smile to make sure that they get breakfast like they do currently, and the absolutely most outstanding teachers to make up for the fact that they will be losing their building. So thank you for your time again. I really appreciate each one of you.
Thank you both for coming and participating in an open forum. The board appreciates the input from the public. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
is there a second?
Second.
Director Beck, you missed the last meeting when we talked about this with some votes now. I'm just going to call for all those in favor, say, okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Superintendent report.
None at this time.
Committee reports. Director Poston, looks like you got a finance committee report, so I'll turn it over to you.
We met last week and we spent some time looking at our key measures report, but then also spent some time looking at what's been spent as far as ESSER funds, and then also looking at the 5-year projections. And I think Kevin was going to go through that.
Yeah, so Brenda, if you'll go to the 3 items on the finance report, start with the monthly fund report. I think that's the second one. Okay. The monthly fund report, please. It's been a little bit since we've seen these. We saw the end of year a couple months ago. There's been some delays with the Department of Ed of filing reports And so getting this back on track and seeing this every single month, you'll start seeing this from here on out. So this report runs for the first 4 months of the year through October. One thing I want to mention is that the first month to 2 months are light months because it's summer and before new contracts start, all of those things come into play a little bit. With that, I highlighted 3 items on here that I wanted to touch on, and they're all interrelated. The top third is our revenues, and you'll see that our federal revenues are lagging behind. There's 2 things that are going on. One key thing is Title III funds that we receive via the AEA. The AEA gets these funds through the state of Iowa, so they will not pay us until the state of Iowa pays them. Thus, the lag from the state of Iowa reimbursing. Normally, we have these by October. Is somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 that we'd receive. The other part of those federal funds, it would be significantly higher. It would be in approximately the $4 million range. There's about $3 million of ESSER funds in the first quarter who have yet to receive those funds. If you remember, we started making some incentive pay in the first quarter of this year. That's part of that. We didn't have those incentive funds last year at this time. So when you have to think about it is what happened from July to October. So with that, when you go down to the salaries and the supplies and materials, that you see a little bit of a bump in those. Remember I said $3 million? That was split between, there was some large purchases we made for ESSER funds in supplies and materials. That's why that's looks like it's so much of an increase. And that $2 million of increase in salaries is due to ESSER funds as well. If you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see the surplus deficit. That $2 million, we received between $3 and $4 million of those federal funds that are lagging behind. That would be closer to a $6 million, just shy of a $6 million balance. So in that light, I'm not going to go into the other funds because I know there's other business to get to. But you can see that we're actually doing a little bit better ahead of schedule. Yes, there's vacancies. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but that's where we're at the end of October. Any questions on that? If not, we'll go to the key measures report. This you've also seen in the past, and you'll see there's updated numbers in there about our target goal of between 7 and 17%. This shows our unspent balance estimated to be at 9.1. We finished last year at 7.2. That's the freshest number if you remember when we looked at the year end. That 9.1% partly is due to vacancies, but it's also due to the timing of the year. That number probably will come down just a little bit, but not so much that we won't see a trend of continuing to increase our UAB. And the same happens, it goes hand in hand with our solvency. You'll see it shows a 22% solvency rate. As we fill positions, that solvency rate will not be quite that high, but we will still be in a very good position solvency-wise. And then on page 2 of that, you'll see, I wanted to make a note of this. It's really early in the year, just on the 4 categories there at the bottom of the instructional support services, non-instructional, and other. The support services shows a deficit. That is just what we have published compared to what is anticipated, projected to spend. If that number continues to lag behind, we'll come back in May and do an amendment. We did an amendment last year. With that amendment last year, we stayed within the 4 categories, but we'll do the same thing if we need to. Again, it's all due to ESSER funding. So I just didn't project enough for ESSER funds this quick in the year. So that's where that lies. Any questions on key measures? Okay, so we'll go to the last item on here, and that is our 5-year projection. If you remember last year, Gary helped us present this last year. The The one thing I wanted to mention is that this is a 5-year, several things I want to mention. This is a 5-year projection with a 1-year decision. The one thing we have to keep in mind that we have to put reasonable, attainable assumptions together, not something that is extremely conservative and not something that is really progressive, because you have to have something that is attainable. If you go to this next slide, I put 3 assumptions together for the Board Finance Committee. With the decision that's going to be coming before you, I wanted to show you a little bit of what could happen to affect a 5-year projection. The three following charts are going to show you some key assumptions is staffing reduction via attrition. Attrition is a key word there. We do anticipate student decline. We do anticipate open enrollment out increases. That's a reality that we face. A 2% state supplemental aid is not super progressive, but it's a little bit conservative, and it would not be surprising if it was a 2% state supplemental aid each year for the next 5 years. So with that, I wanted to talk about the first projection a little bit is just if we did nothing and we had a cost of living adjustment, we had the decline in enrollment, we had to adjust our staffing, all the things we've done in the past. The following 2 projections are the exact same thing, but with reducing through attrition any staff or any overhead costs like utilities, like garbage, all of the things that go into operating a building from a cost factor. So if you go to that first one, this is directly from Forecast 5. You'll see FY22, the chart that shows 7.2%. I always keep that in mind because that's where we're starting the year of this current year. And that does not, the one thing I noticed on this chart, the columns above, I tried to show you where our UAB landed. They do not follow straight up and down from there. The grayed out column is really FY23, so you got to kind of go across from there. You'll see the 7.2% at the very, very top for FY22. It's not labeled at the top on this chart. And you'll see in this projection to sustain this with a 2% state supplemental aid, you'll see the trend is not a good trend. You'll see our trend is it goes up for the next 2 years for FY23, 24, even 25, but you'll see a downward trend that is concerning. There would have to be other adjustments made in that longer range forecast. Remember, it's a 1-year projection. Those other 4 years will be updated each year and a year added going forward. So this does not look like a long-term healthy plan. If you go to the next slide, the next slide is potentially 3 building closures. Everything else assumption-wise is the same other than I took staff savings and overhead savings off of that so you could see more of a reality. You'll see that trend is not near as severe going forward. We get out to about FY26 before you start to see a little bit of a downward trend, but it stays within the targets of a UAB. Still concerns me for having a trend going in that direction. I'll say trend 3 more times before I'm over, I'm sure. If you go to the last slide, the only thing I made different between that slide we just looked at and this one is the increase for FY27 and 28 was not quite as across the board. You'll see where there's leveling. We've talked about this before. It's the leveling of, not the level. And you can see a little bit more of a leveling with 2 building closures. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what we talked about in Board Finance Committee and what I've been looking at for building closure savings strictly in the general fund, dollars and cents and nothing more. I know that's a lot of data, but are there any questions on those?
I apologize if I missed it, but when you said your building closures estimates, did you say how many buildings or?
3.
3 in both of them? So it'd be
Yes.
3 and then 6?
No, 3, just 3.
Oh, okay.
Either scenario.
Okay.
The only thing I changed on that was a little bit lower of a cost of living increase
Right.
in those last 2
Oh,
years,
right.
just to
Thanks.
see what the effect would be.
I'm not seeing any more questions, Kevin. I think you knocked it out of the park.
All right, thank you.
That concludes your guys' finance committee report. Thank you. Committee reports. Director Hayes, you have anything on your data wall ad hoc committee?
I would like to defer to Superintendent Sneckloff.
So right now we are in the planning phases with Dr. Judy Elliott. Today, Courtney, myself, and Diane Campbell, we discussed how does the flow look from the school board all the way through our organization, and I'm very excited about that. Dr. Judy Elliott will be in district the first week of January, and Director Hayes is going to. I'm sorry, I almost said Vice President. Director Hayes will be joining us for some of those talks. Make a note of that, Courtney, and then today the Agenda Planning Committee put on for the February 6th COW that we would do a deep data dig on all of the data points that we would be reviewing. So prioritizing some of those. I know we also looked at an early literacy data review happening at the end of January, as some of our data will be completed with that. So I'm very excited about that. The potential for having all of our data points aligned, because we know the power of what the board focuses on, the entire district focuses on. So we're one step closer to that. We just want to make sure that we get it right, that we're focusing our efforts in the right direction.
Thank you. Legislative advocacy. Director Pasha, you want to take that one?
Superintendent Schneekloth and Dan and I met today to set up our meeting with legislators in Des Moines, and then also setting up the possibility of sending a busload of students up on President's Day. And so we're working on setting those items up.
Thank you. LZAC.
We are having our meeting tomorrow night at 5:30.
Thank you. Long range facilities planning.
Yeah, our last meeting was devoted to planning for the information that was presented at our last COW.
Policy committee. Can you handle that one from the last meeting?
We met last week, and there's a number of policies coming up for a vote and for discussion.
Thank you. That's all the committee reports. Committee assignments. Finance committee, we have Director Klein Jerome and Director Poshton. And then legislative advocacy, Director Poshton and myself, and I believe, Jackson, you wanted to participate in that as a student board member. So we did put you down for that. LZAC, I have Directors Beck and Gordon. Long Range Facilities, Director Pott and myself. And then policy, myself, Director Klein Jerome, and Director Beck. Is there any other policies anybody wants to do, or anything? Not policies, any other committees? Student board members, if you want to jump in. I'm not going to say they're super exciting, but he's like, nope. All right. Before we go into items requiring action, we'll take a 5-minute break so everybody can use the facilities, and then we'll get back after it. All right, we're back. We'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 10.01, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of the Mississippi Valley one-to-one mentoring?
Mr. Chairman,
Director Posturing.
move the board approve the contract for fiscal year 2022-23 with Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Mississippi Valley for one-to-one mentoring services for $106,356.
Second.
Motion's been made by Director Posturing, seconded by Director Kleindrom. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'm gonna call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. All right. May I have a motion on subject 10.02, close Buchanan Elementary School?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
administration recommends the board approve the closing of Buchanan Elementary School at the end of the 22-23 school year.
Is there a second? Seconded by Director Potts. Is there any discussion? Director Gordon.
I know that we had our large group discussion last week, but now that I've had some, another week to go over some of the data that was presented, I want to just real quickly point out that in the presentation, there were all the percentages of the low and high SES numbers at each of the receiving schools. And for those receiving Buchanan students, those are going to be moved into schools that have 71%, 69%, and 72% of low SES students. Also, I would like to reiterate that I don't believe that the evidence presented for why Buchanan of all schools needs to be closed was as significant and necessary as perhaps the other two. I'm very concerned about the neighborhoods surrounding Buchanan, as those schools or those neighborhoods are much farther from their receiving schools than the other ones are. And then, just so I'm not repeating myself over and over again, the receiving schools for the other ones that we're going to be discussing, I can go to those then if you want. I know if I need to follow the agenda, I can discuss those then.
Yeah.
Do that then?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I have serious reservations about continuing to close low-income schools when the 3-4 schools with the lowest percentages of high SES kids, of low SES kids, are getting almost no changes and are not receiving any students from any of the buildings we're discussing closures for. That's all.
Jackson, you had something?
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted, first off, obviously I'm not as well tied in with this as you guys are, but I will, one thing I can say, I do agree with Director Gordon on the, I feel like Buchanan just seemed kind of out of place compared to the two other schools. I don't know exactly where Buchanan came from with the two that we all were also going to do, and also the if there was going to be a third one, that just seemed weird, so I don't know what that was about. But then also, when the new boundaries are going to be drawn, are they also going to change distance requirements or distance limitations for where students can get busing, or is that not going to change?
We are not changing the 1.5 mile distance. And there is an elementary in each region, north, central, and west, that were considered.
Any other discussion? Director Beck.
I just wanted to say that these are really tough decisions, and I also have concerns, particularly Ms. McGlynn brought up a couple of things and requested that we make sure that students being bused, particularly from Buchanan, are at their new schools in time to have breakfast, and that we make sure we do everything we can to allow them to keep their playground, at least for a while, as it's a neighborhood playground. And so I would just like to say that I think, when we do draw the final boundaries, we make sure that we do everything we can to spread out the new students to places that make sense, that are as close as possible, and that we take into consideration that students do need to be in school in time for breakfast. So that's it.
Thank you. Director Hayes?
I was also along those lines with transportation. When we figured out what the boundary changes may be, is there an approximate time that the earliest student would have to be on the bus? Because I know with it being dark earlier, how soon would they need to be on the bus for like the longest bus ride?
The distance that, for the proposed boundary changes, we currently have examples of students riding the bus as long as the students that are impacted would be riding. So it will not be an anomaly for how long these students would be riding a bus, if that makes sense. I do not know when the first route is picked up, but it would not be any longer than the current situation that we have in our district. We have students that are in our schools that ride the buses for the exact amount of time that these students will be riding the bus.
Any other discussion? Director Gordon?
I wanted to mention too that when we make the decisions when we're discussing closing schools in lower income areas and with families that have fewer resources, we talk a lot about busing and how we want to make sure that there's busing available, but we're not always talking about whether or not those students are going to be able to catch a bus and whether or not they have the family getting them to the bus stop, or whether they have somewhere to go if they miss the bus. If they know their way to their new school, if they're going to have to walk from a missed bus. There's a lot of things that we have to take in consideration when we are determining whether or not to close schools where the receiving schools are considerably farther from their home neighborhoods. Buses are not the be-all, end-all.
Any other discussion? I have a quick clarifying question. I think I know the answer to this already, but when the kiddos come in on the buses, breakfast is available to them. I mean, I know that from having elementary kids, but I don't know if that's, so I just wanted it on record that was,
yes,
they would not miss breakfast.
Correct.
And they would have that.
Correct.
Any other discussion? Director Gordon.
Sorry, I keep thinking of things. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the correlation between the earlier presentation where we were talking about dropout prevention and how absenteeism is a predictor of dropouts. And so when we take away neighborhood schools, we are more likely to see higher rates of absenteeism, which then correlates to higher dropouts. So that needs to be considered as well.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Postian.
Yes.
Director Gordon,
No.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
my vote is yes, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.03, close Monroe Elementary School?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board accept administration's recommendation to close Monroe Elementary School at the end of the 22-23 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Pasha. Is there any discussion? Director Gordon.
For schools set to receive Monroe students, one of them is currently at 88% of low SES students. One of them is at 81% of low SES students. One of them is at 73% of low SES students. And Monroe itself, while I don't have the percentage, it is also a low SES school. So we are taking one and adding to that number. And that's something we need to consider.
Director Beck.
As a continuation of my previous theme, it's not an easy decision to make these types of decisions. And it affects not just the kids in those buildings or the buildings they're going to or the families. It affects our whole district. And so I hope that we are able to wrap the district around these kids and these families that are having changes made to their neighborhood schools and make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible if it has to happen.
Any other discussion? Superintendent.
Mr. Driscoll, or two parts here. The numbers that you are referencing are from the presentation last time. Is that accurate? Is it accurate to say that those numbers are the new numbers when the students transition? So the numbers that you are reading are taking the boundary changes into effect, and those would be the new SES numbers. Is that accurate, Mr. Driscoll?
That's accurate, yes.
So a point of clarification is that those numbers took into account for the students transitioning into those buildings, as stated at the previous meeting, that we, while we can't completely balance the SES numbers, it was an attempt to
Let me speak to that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So if you remember, the key assumptions were that we were attempting, where reasonably possible, to get any attendance zone, any building, as close to that district average of, I think, 6634 as possible. And again, reasonably possible, because we could draw in a attendance zone like an Amoeba or something like this and bus people all over. So that's why we say reasonably possible in the general neighborhoods. And so when we drew those, attendance zones, any family living within the border that we drew would then be calculated into that. So to your point, yes.
Director Beck.
Just to clarify, when we do make adjustments like that, how does that affect our Title I funding and what becomes a Title I school?
It will impact it.
And so are we able to, how does that change right now? We have certain numbers of schools that are considered title schools because of the numbers of students they have. Are we increasing the numbers of schools that are eligible for those funding?
There is a potential for that, yes.
Okay.
Director Poston.
This has already been said, and I'm not sure if it needs to be said again, but we've talked about pouring the resources into these buildings to help the kids make this adjustment. And I would expect that that's what we will do. And so I think, again, closing these schools is not an easy thing to do, but we need to do, as a district, we need to pour the resources to these buildings and help the kids make that adjustment.
Is there any other discussion? Director Haight? No. Director Gordon?
Thank you for clarifying that about the presentation last week, but it doesn't really change things, I don't think, considerably looking at the receiving schools, because those schools are still in that same neighborhood. And I understand what you're saying about, not making an amoeba of the boundaries. But I also think that had we had a little bit more time to look at the boundaries and discuss the boundaries before tonight's vote, that may have, I think we could have had some more discussion around it, I guess is where I'm going with it, because I'm a little disappointed to see that we have buildings in our district that are not receiving anyone from any of the closed buildings. And they also happen to be the buildings with the lowest number of low SES families and students in them. And that doesn't seem like we're meeting our goal, I guess, of diversifying the district the way that we say that we're going to do. It doesn't increase the access and success for all students where disproportionality is indicated. It doesn't help give resources to the students that need them most if we're shuffling them into more buildings that are already struggling for resources. And I'm just feeling kind of frustrated about that.
To clarify, we are not voting on the boundaries tonight, Director Gordon. So that vote is projected to come January 8th. So those are separate from this, and we can continue to make adjustments. Part of our plan is we knew that boundaries is an infinite conversation, and we did not want to, we wanted that work to start when we knew we had a starting point. Thank you.
Jackson?
I just wanted to say kind of if there are any students of the schools that are being voted on tonight watching this, if they see this, kind of student to student, that it will be okay. We will get through this. That this may or may not be your first sort of big shakeup, big life shakeup, and if it is, I think this will be something where you and your friends really can kind of bond together on this, and I know you guys will get through this. I know that you will get out of this stronger, and we do love you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Superintendent?
And to kind of add an additional comment on to what has been said in each one of these, that the idea of Title I, different resources will be applied and follow the students. That is a key assumption with this process.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
Director Gordon?
Yes, but only because we're still discussing boundaries.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.04, close Washington Elementary School?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that the board accept administration's recommendation for the closing of Washington Elementary School at the end of the 22-23 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Is there any discussion on this one? Director? No. Oh, she didn't. She just was. Director Gordon.
Despite the fact that this has been determined to be receiving, I still just want to point out, to be consistent with my conversation here, that the schools receiving from Washington are both at 66% low SES once they've received. And if I'm not mistaken, there are only 2 schools receiving from Washington. I mean, I wrote everything down. That's what it is. It's what it is. So.
I thought there was 3.
We can double check that, but I believe it was 3. Mr. Driscoll nodded.
Is there any other discussion on it? Director Potts.
These are all hard votes, but the Washington vote for me is hardest because all 3 of my older kids went to Washington. They were Redskins. It was Washington Redskins then. My wife was the PTA president for years, and I worked fun night. I got the toilet bowl toss. That was a big game. It's a tough vote to close Washington. But financially, we don't have... My daughter-in-law teaches at Washington. I'm in trouble. Mr. Dixon. You remember Mr. Dixon?
Director Gordon.
I'm just trying to remember. I had already closed it. Well, no, I didn't close it, but I don't want to scroll through the whole presentation from last week again. But the main reason behind Washington being a choice was because it's a multi-level building, and its age, correct? Like those were the 2 main factors. And being multi-level is too difficult to modify, and it's an older building with more upgrades that are necessary, correct?
Those are 2 of the reasons.
Mr. Driscoll, if you could clarify that.
Yeah, the lion's share of the Washington boundary zone is going to Garfield. There is a section that is slated to go to Eisenhower, and there is a section slated to go to McKinley. So there is 3 different attendance zones that.
So McKinley, Eisenhower, and Garfield?
Correct.
Is there any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Poston.
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome.
Yes.
Director Gordon.
No.
Director Potts.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.05 sixth grade?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I recommend, I make a motion that we move the sixth graders to the middle school effective in the fall of 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Who got that one off first? Director Hayes. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Director Gordon.
I think I've had more emails about this topic than even the school closures. And most of what I've heard from has been teacher after teacher after teacher saying that it will be to the elementary school's detriment if we put this off another year. I know that last week you had mentioned the considerations of wanting them to become middle schools as opposed to junior highs, as opposed to intermediate schools, and that takes some time and effort to put the right pieces into place. And I understand that and I empathize with that. However, I think for the continuity of one, teacher stress levels, two, the number of transitions for the students, the teachers, and the necessity of bringing preschools into the buildings as soon as possible, that this really needs to be considered to be done next fall instead of fall of 2024. I think that even transitioning from an intermediate or junior high school model to middle school could still potentially be put off another year. We've had intermediate and junior highs before. We could make them work for a year while we work out a plan for the bigger transition later. I don't think one has to preclude the other. But I just keep hearing from everyone across the district of how crowded the elementary schools are. And when we're receiving more students into these schools, it is going to be really very difficult to properly handle everyone. But more so than that is just the number of transitions, the teachers that are going to have to move buildings this year and then buildings the following year for sixth graders, the students that are going to have to move from, fifth grade at Buchanan to sixth grade at Harrison or Truman or wherever, and then seventh grade at Wood. That's a lot. That is a lot for an adolescent whose brain is right on the cusp of all sorts of messy, terrible things already. They're already at their emotional peaks. It's a hard transitory time for anyone, and I think that the fewer transitions we have to give those students, the better off they're going to be in the long term. And I think we do have to look at the long-term mental health and social emotional health of the students in this case.
Director Beck.
So I've been going back and forth on this one in my mind and taking in all the information. We've been hearing from a lot of teachers about overcrowding. I've heard from a lot of parents on this topic, more so than the school closings as well, that students not be moved right away. The sixth grade stay in elementary school for the next year, as we initially discussed. And then I've heard from teachers and parents on the other side as well. I think a couple of things stick out to me. Number one, if we move sixth grade students because they would have to go to a new elementary school for 1 year and then to a new school, well, the same thing's going to happen to the fifth graders. They would then go to a new elementary school for 1 year and then go to middle school the following year. So it doesn't really matter what age we do, there's going to be a group of kids, one cohort, that has to go from their current elementary school to a new elementary school for 1 year before they go to either junior high or middle school. And so to me, that sort of, once I wrap my head around that, that became less of an issue. Not that I don't care, I care very much, but it's going to happen no matter what. Again, crowding is also an issue. We've heard from a lot of of people that it seems like our schools are already kind of busting at the seams. But we also know that the move we've also heard that the move to put sixth grade back in elementary was not necessarily done with the most insightful planning, and that to put students back in without insightful planning would be equally detrimental, if not more so. And so I've been going back and forth on this, and I have, for the longest time, I thought it should be a priority. But I also have a student who's now in 8th grade, and his 6th grade year was the first year left in elementary school. We were happy about that, but I heard about a lot more discipline issues in the elementary schools that year. So I think it's going to be rough no matter what we decide. I think academically, if we are going to do a true middle school where we incorporate all of the special programming that 7th and 8th graders get now, music like choir, orchestra, to the extent that they get it now in junior high, then it will take a little bit of planning. But we do need to be very careful about making sure we have the support in our elementary schools as we make this transition.
Thank you. Director Poston.
Like I've voiced before, I don't know why we were putting this off until 2024. As a board, let's not fall into that same old rut that's happened in the past where we delay and delay and delay. Superintendent Snakecloth, you have a very talented and dedicated staff sitting over here. They're also very well paid. I have all the confidence in them. I have all the confidence in you that this could be done in the next 8 months, and that we could have those 6th graders in junior high at the beginning of 2023. And the reason I feel so strongly about that is, again, we need to be making other decisions when 2024 rolls around, whether it's continuing to right-size the district or getting preschool in some of our elementaries. I think it's so critical that we get that done now and not put this off. To me, it just does not make any sense to delay it, and so I am definitely not in favor of this motion.
Hang on one second, Jackson. I'll get you a clarifier. So, and I know Director Poston's mentioned it a few different times with like the preschool. We will still have early learning centers though, because I know that that's been a thing that I've gotten a couple of emails on. So I just wanted to clarify that. Even though preschool will go into some elementary, we will still have. Is that correct?
Correct. The big push from the state is right now early learning centers. We currently have 2 early learning centers. I think when our school board references preschools in our schools, are referencing a satellite preschool, which that means there would be 1 to 2 rooms inside of our elementary schools. Where those locations are would be determined through the planning process and needs analysis. But yes, I know that is something that I have received questions about and have clarified that as we move forward, the state's push will be to have early learning centers, and it's important for us to have satellite spots as well. So it doesn't indicate that we are moving away from Children's Village X, Y, or Z at this time.
Thank you for the clarification. Jackson.
So with the 2024 date that's on here, I think it's safe to assume this doesn't have anything to do with these school closures. So if that's not the case, from what I remember, we had moved sixth graders back not that many years ago. So, what was the original purpose of moving them in the first place, and what failed to want this reversal?
There were multiple plans and factors in place for moving the sixth graders back. That those decisions were made by a previous administration, and since then we have a brand new cabinet, and so it's really hard to talk about the previous decisions, and because there are a lot of factors that go into that. I know one of the ideas was that we heard a lot about the discipline of sixth graders in junior high, and so they an additional year of early literacy, high intense reading would be beneficial. Well, then when the sixth graders were moved down, a pandemic hit, and so then we went into full survival mode. So we've had several years of this in our community. What we hear a lot of is the opportunities that our sixth graders get, and so that middle school experience is completely different. The other overwhelming piece that we heard throughout this 1.5 year long process of facility master planning is our middle school is an incredibly important time in Davenport schools, and our teachers and staff and community to have an additional year with those kiddos before preparing them, getting them ready for the playing for keeps, so to speak, at the high schools was a very important factor. So those are some of the things that we consider, and just knowing why things are switched. There were very good intentions when the students were moved. The district is now moved in a different direction, and the community has, through the survey process, like I said, through this 1.5 year long process, has chosen the path that we're on today.
So it's not a difference. It's just purely a difference in vision, essentially.
Correct, and this vision was cast by our community. In terms of the pathway.
Director Gordon.
You may have already said something about this and it just went in one ear and out the other. So if you did, please forgive me, but I know that we have the early learning centers. Is there any concern for the elementary buildings that currently have preschool programs in them? Is there any concern that with the sixth graders, if they remain in again through next school year, that those preschool programs would have to be moved elsewhere? Is there going to be enough room with the incoming receiving of the closed schools plus the sixth grade? Do we need to be concerned about that?
I do not know the current location of all of our preschools, but I will take that and I will take that note down and get that question answered.
Any other discussion? Director Beck.
Is that a question that could be answered tonight? About whether, I don't know what buildings have preschools in them off the top of my head, but are any of the buildings that we've discussed receiving the bulk of students from the closed schools? Are those buildings with preschools in them at all?
To give you an example, Truman has a preschool.
Okay.
And they're keeping their pre-K.
So moving sixth grade, moving new students into that building plus keeping sixth grade is not going to affect those preschools.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to, is that what you were asking?
It is, but that's just one building. What about the other buildings? There's one at Hayes, which they're receiving students from Monroe and Buffalo. And then I think, is it Buffalo or Bluegrass that also has a preschool? I know one of those does, but neither one of those are receiving students. So, and I'm not sure if any of the other buildings do. Those are just the few I knew right off the top of my head that have pre-K. So I just wanted to make sure that that's not a concern of those having to move out of those buildings.
Referencing our October 1 count, besides our partner schools, this is what's reported on our enrollment. Buffalo has one, Monroe, Truman might have two because there's 27 kids there. That's it. The rest are partner sites.
Did you have any other questions, Director Horton? Jackson.
So, when you say partner sites, so Children's Village, that's its own like independence thing, essentially.
Correct. When I say partner sites, I mean like Noah's Ark, the Y, those entities.
Okay, thank you.
Director Beck.
I did not realize Monroe had a preschool. Do we have plans for those students as well? I mean, most of them would be entering kindergarten next year, but the preschool students, upcoming preschool students in those neighborhoods, they need to have access to preschool. So I would like to know that they do have access, easy access to a preschool.
The Children's Village West is 3 blocks up the hill.
Right. Okay.
From Monroe. And now I don't know. I don't have their enrollment capacities in front of us, but
Okay.
Director Poston.
Well, I think at the very least that these schools that are being closed and we're moving those kids, the buildings that we're moving to, I would hope there'd be pre-K in those buildings because that would be another resource to help these kids make the transition.
Any other discussion? Director Potts.
If you just listen to pieces of this, you think the sixth graders, you take them, no, you keep them, no, you take them, no, you keep them. We're talking about, in the bigger picture, reconstituting our junior highs, our intermediate schools. So it's not just adding the sixth graders, it's changing how we're going to deliver instruction to sixth graders, seventh graders, and eighth graders. And that involves training of staff. If we're going to go to a middle school concept where we're going to go back to having teams of teachers teaching a half of a grade, a team A and a team B on both, teachers have to be trained to do that. They have to start learning how to get away from the fact that, okay, the kids come in, I close my door, I do what I want, bell rings, off they go. Middle school concept is a whole different way of delivering the services and the care kids need and following up with them with a group of teachers that are dedicated to that 100, 125, 130 kids that are theirs for the year. Also, we have to talk about reconstituting curriculum because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe elementary school kids have math every day for 45 minutes and social studies every day for 45 minutes. But when they come to the intermediate school, in that, no matter what structure we have, they're going to have math and science every day for a period. And we don't have curriculum for that. It doesn't exist. Well, it may exist from when they were there years ago. So we have to develop a curriculum for that. We have to reconstitute all of our exploratories because they've taken a hit over the years. If we've reduced staff, buildings have cut in that exploratory area. They've cut the art teacher or the music teacher or the shop teachers or the home ec teachers or the music teacher. They've reduced those offerings. We eliminated foreign language from our intermediates just this year. We have to look at putting that. That's all curriculum-based stuff that we have to plan for. We have to develop course numbers for all of this. We have to develop how we're going to schedule this. We have to decide if sixth graders are going to have the option to trying out to become in the Creative Arts Academy. How will that work? How will that process take place? So there's a lot of foundational work that has to take place before we take the sixth graders and move them to the intermediate school. We have to have something to move them into that is of value for them in their life and their education, and that their parents see is of value, other than we got to move you because it allows us to do something else. No, we want to move you because we want to do something for you. And I think you need the plan for that. We've got a lot of planning we've got to do now just to get next year started with closures and transferring of kids and buses and moving of staff and teachers and all that's going to be a Herculean task. And I think we take the time to plan moving our middle schools right and developing our middle schools. I think we're going to be much happier with the product, and we'll have a lot fewer headaches and a lot fewer why didn't we think of that, why didn't we do that, or trying to do stuff in the middle of trying to teach. I just think we're in the long. Yeah, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be a crowded cafeterias in some elementary schools. I'm sure of it. Okay, but that's a small price to pay for what the ultimate outcome will be, a better educational experience for our intermediate school kids in the long run. And that's what the whole long-range facility plan's about, providing a better educational experience for kids pre-K through 12.
Jackson?
Just look this up. I don't know, Beck and Gordon, you two might find this useful. I don't know if Washington has a preschool, but Children's Village Hoover is a 0.7 mile, 17-minute walk from Washington. So we would have Truman for Buchanan students, I would assume, and then Hoover for Washington, and then Children's Village West for Monroe. So, yeah.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? The only thing I will add, along with some of the rest of you that had mentioned, I probably had just as many people reach out to me, parents and staff members that were for waiting the year or doing it right away. So it was kind of a toss-up on that. I understand the taking the time to do it right. I know many of us at this board table right now have went very hard at our administration on doing things that didn't work out because we just rushed into them and did them, because we've always been behind the curve, and now we're starting to get up to the point to where we're able to actually do things that are going to affect the kiddos' outcomes and their educations and things like that. And we're able to do things. So I just want everyone to be mindful of that, because sometimes I feel like we say one thing and then we do something else later on. So we've all done that before, and I appreciate the fact that want to take the time to do it right and to roll out that experience, like with the exploratories and things like that. I'm going to be honest, for myself personally, it was shop classes in junior high that got me wanting to pay attention and go to school all the time. It led me into the construction industry where I still work today. But it was that in the junior high level that got me in. That stuff hasn't been in there in a long time. All right. Any other discussion? Director Gordon.
Yeah, I think that I know we want to do the right thing for the students. Obviously, that's why we're all here. That's what we're doing. But we really have to take into consideration the teachers as well. They are just as affected by the transitions and the movements and the closures and the realignments and the this and the that as everybody else. And respectfully, Director Potts, teachers have been trained to work in teams. They already know what they're doing. They are great at teamwork. That's part of the fabric of what they do, and you know that. You were a principal. So I think it's insulting to assume that just because they don't have an extra year to prepare for some ideal thing, that they shouldn't do it. I think that to minimize the transitions, especially in this time period where we are so short-staffed with teachers and they are stressed to the max, it would behoove us to listen to them when they're telling us that they need something from us and that we could do something to make their lives easier in this moment, right now, when a million other things are so difficult. And if that means doing this move a year earlier than we anticipated, if that would take 5 pounds of weight off of their shoulders, that in itself is a good reason to do it, if you ask me. That, Allison, you're right. Like the students, yes, some group of them are going to have to transition twice, but teachers won't. Teachers can make one transition. We can do that easier for them. And like I said before, we can make these plans. We've got this great team of people that people keep pointing out. You guys do great work. You do fast work. You do excellent teamwork. Let's give you the reins to do it.
Director Klein-Jerome.
I was teaching at the time when the sixth graders originally moved into the junior high, just plopped in there, no direction, no guidance, okay, teach them like they're elementary, but they're in junior high. I don't want to see us make that mistake again. So if it takes some time to get things that we've taken away, because you can't suddenly just resurrect those exploratory classes and those foreign language classes. I just think we need the time to do it right. I know it's a difficult decision, but I want to make sure we're doing it right for our students.
Any other discussion? Director Hayes.
I agree with Director Klein-Jerome. We do have an awesome cabinet, and we have stretched them as thin as we possibly can. Do this, do that. I wasn't at Monday's meeting. However, I did watch it on YouTube. And Mr. Driscoll, I think it was, that when he gave his presentation, he gave it in 2 different sections. If the board wanted this, we're going to do it this way. If the board wanted that, we'll do it that way. They anticipated the direction that we would go either way, so they would have an answer. We have our presentation that we had tonight, that they're working on that. There's the long-range facility plans. We're still trying to keep our finances right. There are so many moving parts in the district right now that I think in order to get it right, that we need to allow that extra year and not overtax our cabinet with that, because at a point you have so many things thrown at you that it almost leads to burnout, and we don't want that. We have way too many things going on right now, and I just feel that other year to prepare and to do it right would be beneficial to everyone involved.
Director Beck.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to reiterate, I have gotten equal numbers of messages from teachers, from staff, or from teachers and from parents on both sides. 2023, 2024, everybody's not going to be happy no matter what we do. And I think Director Potts eloquently stated sort of what we're trying to get at here, and Director Klein-Jerome as well, explaining how it's a little bit different, how it's different from elementary. And so I think, again, it's going to be a rough transition, whether it's spread over 1 year or 2, but we do have a great team. We do have great staff. We do have great teachers. And I'm confident that we can, with a little extra time, do this the best way possible for all of our students.
Any other discussion? The one last thing I want to say, I only ever hear about teachers all the time. We have way more staff than that. It will affect our secretaries, our food service, our paraeducators, our custodial, our maintenance. It will affect everyone, not just teachers. I understand that, but that's all we ever think that this district does is has teachers. We have so much more than that, and I don't want any other employee group to feel like they were left out or anything like that. We have amazing staff that do amazing things in this district. I mean, sometimes all you hear about is the bad stuff in the media, but we have a lot of phenomenal things going on here, and that stuff would not happen with our amazing staff, from administration down to the teachers, again, secretaries, food service, paraeducators, custodial maintenance. It doesn't work without everyone. So I just want to reiterate that because we get one-sided so much that I don't want any other staff member to think that we're forgetting about them and not including them. Again, we have amazing people that do work in this district, and we have amazing products that come out of this district because of all the things. And if we can do some great things at the junior high level, that's awesome. That's going to set the kids up from elementary to junior high and then set them on their pathway to high school. I think, again, for myself, I want to thank every staff member in this district. I don't care what bargaining unit you're in or what your title is. I think you all do a phenomenal job, and I never lose sight of that. So thank you all very, very much. And with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. I'm gonna do a roll call on that. Anything for you, Brenda? Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gordon,
No.
Director Poston,
No.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome. Oh, I already did you. I was on the wrong line. I'm sorry. I was on the wrong line. My vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 10.06 policies for board approval?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
the Policy Committee recommends the board approve the following policies: 100, 302.02, 407.02, 408.01, 501.13, 502.07, 502.08, 502.10, 503.02, 505.01, 506.02, 603.06, 604.11, 605.06, 802.04, and 804.05.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Potts. Any discussion?
President Gosa, I would just like to point out that on 50501, there was a slight change in there. And since the last time we had this, it just says high school conferences, and this is what was added, are held every term, but are not individually scheduled. So that held every term was put in there because that is the way we currently do it. So I just wanted everybody to know there was a slight change.
Director Beck.
I also wanted to point out that the title of policy 502.10 is actually being changed to student use of motor vehicles, not just use of motor vehicles.
And Director Poston, on the vaping policy, we took your suggestions and added those in too. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Director Beck.
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. We'll move on to discussion items. The only items for discussion tonight are policies.
So the vast majority of these are fall under HR, and Jamie W. has gone through them with the policy committee. And so this is what we came up with. The only one that is not part of that is the district philosophy, but that's the one that the board came up with collectively with the help of TAG Communications. The only difference here is that we were encouraged by IASB to make sure that we could be legally compliant at all times with that policy. And so rather than saying we will and we shall, we put in some language that was a little bit more permissive.
Dan?
Oh, Director Klein-Drum.
Policy 40606 on annuities, I had sent it to Brenda, who forwarded it to Jamie, because it does say that if there is a time frame for adding or changing tax sheltered annuities, and there is contract language that addresses that, so I think that needs to go into that policy. So just somebody look at it before it comes up again.
Did you take that note? Thank you.
Is there any other questions on the policies?
If there are no questions, we will see these for a second discussion at our next regular meeting.
All right. Administrative reports. Board request. Board request. This board request is from Director Beck. Date of request December 12th, 2022. Item requested is a request for information. Description of a request. I would like the boundary discussion to make sure that we are taking advantage of all available space in all of our elementary buildings. Why are you making this request? We have seen the plans to move students, but we have heard from teachers that overcrowding is a big issue. No school should have disproportionately bigger or smaller classes than the rest of the district. When would you like this? As soon as possible. Is there a second? Any other board requests? All right, board reflections. We will start with Director Beck.
Well, I mean, it's never fun to vote on closing buildings, and that is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a board member. But because we've had a lot of discussions, very organized discussions with a lot of data from our long-range facilities planning committee, the community, I feel much more comfortable making the decisions than when I was asked to do something similar a couple years ago. And so I just want to say I appreciate the diligence with which the district and the board have approached this process. It's not fun, but I think we're doing the best we can, and we all are doing what we think is best for our district and our students.
Thank you. Director Poston.
We made decisions tonight that should have been made years ago. And so we're playing catch up, and it makes it more traumatic. I just hope this board doesn't fall into that same, as I mentioned before, same rut by delaying some of the things that we need to be doing now. I just don't see the advantage to the district delaying some of this from an organizational standpoint, and then also from a financial standpoint.
Thank you, Director Hayes.
I enjoyed the presentation from Courtney and her team and look forward to seeing what that brings about in the future and the discussion items. Even as intense as they were, you know, like Director Poston said, you know, it's something that had to be done, and it's never any fun when you're closing a school. And I know some of these schools are really important, you know, family legacies. Some families have grown up into third generations from their children, their grandchildren all going to the same neighborhood schools. So with that being closed, that's a hard transition to make. And, you know, I'm just looking forward to the receiving schools to be very receptive with these students and provide the families what they need for those transitions. Because again, it's not an easy thing to do, but sometimes things have to be done for the greater good of the majority rather than a few. Not saying that the few aren't important, but when we make these decisions, they are made looking at, you know, 14,000 children versus 300. You know, we have to really think about what may work best for the majority of them.
Thank you. Director Gordon.
This was my first meeting where I've had to make really, really difficult decisions, and I hated it. However, I am appreciative of all the information and all the discussions that led up to this point and all the hard work that has been put into all of this by everyone that's been a part of it. I also wanted to thank our student board members for your valuable input throughout the process and tonight. And on a separate note, I'm really excited to make a tree for the festival next year. So make sure you let us know when that's upcoming.
Thank you, Director Potts.
Some board meetings are a lot more consequential than other board meetings. This was a very consequential board meeting. We've adopted phase 1 of our long-range facility plan. That's immense. And there are other pieces to come. Our conversations are very important because we're all going in the same direction. Some of us we have different timelines maybe and different routes to get there, but we're all going in the same direction. The goal is all the same.
Thank you, Director Kleindrum.
I agree with all of you that this was a difficult decision, but I do feel that we got lots of information and have talked about it for many months. Lots of thought went into all of this. I also appreciate the modified allowable growth at-risk programming presentation. This stuck out. Going to do it right, not just continue doing what we are doing that isn't working. And I think that's really important, that we just don't keep spinning the wheel. If it's not working, what is it we need to change and do better? I appreciate that. I also appreciate that student board members, your schools are thinking of others. It's not just you, but you're raising money for Brittany's gifts and for the angel trees, that you are thinking outside of even your school. And I really appreciate the fact that you're taking that initiative.
Thank you. Landon, you're up first.
I hope that the board continues to be careful and thorough in the items following tonight's discussion and decisions. And I recognize that decisions made tonight were not easy at all. And I just want to thank you for keeping the interests of students and families ranging from pre-K all the way up to high school and even after that in mind during this time. I'd like to extend my condolences to the families who will be affected in the closing of Washington, Monroe, and Buchanan, as well as some encouragement. I have moved my entire life across 6 states, 8 schools, and roughly a dozen different homes. I'm familiar with what it feels like to be separated from friends and teachers. To the parents, be assured that while something like this is tough for a kid, us kids are tougher than just about anything. And to the students, stay strong and keep being you. Speaking from experience, the fastest way to make new friends is to be yourself. Thank you.
This is the last place I expected to cry. um, what can I say that hasn't been said already? I did not ever expect to have something hit me as hard as it did at a meeting like this. I as soon as that first vote was casted for Buchanan, I felt everything drop between everybody. That thing, yeah, that was heavy. But yeah, like I said, and like Landon said, I think this will be tough but not insurmountable. I think our kids will make it. I think that when they get up to the high schools, I think that, especially for those who are maybe right now in 4th, 5th grade, who dealt with the crux of the pandemic, when they get to high school, when they're out of high school and have their own kids, they're going to have a heck of a story to tell. That's for sure. I guess last thing, I don't know maybe what you guys thought of this, and I want to talk to some people about this, but I really would like, personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody, but personally, if we could get some of our groups together, National Honor Society, student senates and whatnot, to help with teachers moving when they have to pack up their stuff to move schools. I know that maybe this isn't necessarily anything that the board would deal with, but I'm wondering if you guys had any ideas for logistics on that, or if you knew someone who you could point me to. I'd really like to get into contact with some schools and some teachers to see if we can make that work, because I know that this is going to be very, very hard emotionally. We've very much made that clear, but I think we're also missing the physical aspect, that we're talking about possibly 100+ rooms having to be emptied out and filled again. So I would very much like to help with that if that's possible.
Thank you both. Superintendent Schneckloff.
Well, I say this all the time. People ask me all the day, what are the kids like in schools nowadays? And I just want to take both of you and carry you around and show everyone in the planet that the world's going to be okay, because you are our future leaders. This is forever saved, and I'm going to capture what you just said. That is so incredibly important. The fastest way to make friends is to be yourself, because you'll find the right friends. What an incredibly powerful mission. And Jackson, those I saw them writing what you said down. Can you imagine how supported our teachers would feel if those honor societies were there helping them? What a wonderful gesture. I think for me, it's important to recognize that schools are living things, and we have to allow ourselves to grieve and be sad. And what's the future? This board looked up and saw the horizon and has begun making decisions that should have been made a long time ago. Right now, it's going to be very hard, and it's going to be hard over the next 6 or 7 months in the year or so. But I envision a district that has a strong middle school, that has very wonderful, attractive programs for students and families. Our facilities with the deferred maintenance that you just deferred to our high schools, to our middle schools, totaling right now, I believe, around $40 million. Don't quote me on that. Millions of dollars deferred immediately. Yes, the transitioning is going to be difficult. This board is setting the tone for the future, and I consider that to be incredibly hard work and necessary work. There's been comments made about our cabinet, and I'm very proud of our cabinet, and we will do anything this board asks us to do. And we have a charge, and the next 6 months is incredibly important for us. You've heard our board say we have to get it right. Now we have to get it right. And so, very difficult decisions were made tonight, and I'm incredibly proud of the process, the people involved in it.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate, like everyone said, it was very difficult decisions made tonight. Monroe was one of the hardest ones for me because I actually went to Monroe till 3rd grade, and we moved up to the north side of town. So I'm very appreciative for the process and all the people that filled out the surveys, came to meetings for open forums, as well as sent emails and all that, and reached out and were a part of the process along the way. Obviously, we can't please everyone, and hopefully going forward, we'll see better outcomes for the kiddos and things like that. And again, it was just a difficult meeting tonight to make some tough choices. And again, I want to thank all my fellow board members for all their effort and time they put in, not only, coming to the meetings, but fielding phone calls from people, as well as answering emails and everything else, for a job that gives you an annual salary of $0. And, I appreciate all of you that go above and beyond. So it's a privilege to be the president of this board and work with all of you, and I want to thank you for that. Student board members, I greatly appreciate you all always giving your input and being part of the discussion, because we like to hear that stuff, and you advocate for all of your feeder schools. So thank you all very much. And with that, Director Potts, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Merry Christmas to all, and I move we adjourn.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned.
Board members, before you go, I have something for you. So